For 2 years, I've been the guy giving condo owners the bad news. Prices falling, inventory stacking, investors, they're bleeding. Every month, I've come on here with a number worse than the month before. Every month, a few of you have told me I'm too negative about condos. Last month, I told you the annual decline in condo prices has accelerated to 9.5% and that the rate of decline getting worse was a number that should keep condos owners up at night. This month, that number, 2.3%, not the 9.5, 2.3 in a single month. So the annual rate of decline in Toronto condos, the prices that is, shrank by more than 7 points. The average condo actually sold for more in July than it did in June. I haven't been doing these updates long enough to be suspicious of one good month. So I went through the whole report looking for the catch. Let me show you what I found, because the supply data underneath this is the part that actually matters. Let's start where every condo story of the last 2 years started, the flood of listings. In July, there was about 4,000 new condo listings that came on the market across the GTA. Last July, that number is about 5,000. So new condo listings, they're down about 18%. Sales were about 1,500, and that's on TRREB's report, essentially flat against last July. It's down like 1/10 of 1%, which is pretty much nil. So the same number of buyers showed up and nearly a fifth fewer sellers did. That's the first time in this entire downturn I could point at the supply line and say, it's January. I think it's turning. For 2 years, the condo problem was never demand. It was that every month brought more units than there were buyers to take them. July is the month that stopped. And it's worth understanding who those missing sellers are, because it tells you whether this holds. The wave of condo listings that defined 2024 and 2025 came overwhelmingly from investors. These are people who have bought pre-con at sub 2% rates, took delivery into a market where the rent did not cover the carrying costs and listed to stop the bleeding. That group has now largely, they worked their way through. The ones who are going to give up and sell mostly already did. What is left is listings closer to regular people selling for regular reasons. And someone selling their own home does not dump it at any price the way an investor does when they're losing money every month. Well, fewer for sellers is the biggest change in this segment. And it's not the kind of thing that flips back like in a month. Let's look at the accumulated pile and you see the same thing. Active condo listings finished July about 8,300. Last July, it was about over 10,000, and that was sitting on the market. And that pile is down about 16% in a year. And if you follow the line back to its peak around 10,000 in the middle of last year, it's been grinding down ever since. So translate that into how long it would take to sell everything currently listed, and you get about 5 months of inventory. How you get that number? You take the 8,300, that's the number of listings sitting there, and you divide by what sold in July, which was about 1,500. And that's your answer. So if nothing new came in the market, it would take a bit over 5 months to clear the shelf. A year ago, that calculation came out to about 6.4. So that's still a buyer's market by any definition. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, but more than a full month of supply lighter than it was like last year. So we're heading in the right direction. And the reason that particular number matters more than the price in any given month is that months of supply is actually sets negotiating power. At 6 months and up, buyers, they call the shots. Between 4 and 6, sellers, they stop losing ground. And under 4 months that is, sellers start getting choices. I mean, they start getting control. So condos have moved from the deep end of that range towards the middle. And every 10th of a month, it drops like a little bit more power from the buyer side to the seller side. So it's slowly shifting. Now, the other side of it, because I'm not going to sell you a recovery that is not in the data. Condos are still taking longer to sell, not less. The average condo sat about 40 days before selling in July, and that's up from 37 days last July. And the sale to list ratio is 97%, meaning that the typical seller is still accepting about 3% under asking. So nobody's having a bidding war on a condo this summer. What changed is not that condos got easy to sell. What changed is that the wall of new supply that was burying the segment finally stopped growing. And that pile that built up over the last 2 years has started to slowly come down. The sales to new list ratio makes it the cleanest. So it takes sales divided by new listings, where below 40% is a buyer's market. Condos came in at 37% in July. Last July, it was like 30.8%. So still under 40. So technically a buyer's market. But I want to be precise about that. But the direction has been consistent since the spring. And the gap against last year has been widening in the condo owner's favor for months. So this is segment moving last and slowest, which is exactly what I told you would happen. It's still moving. And there's a long-term piece behind this that nobody connects to these monthly numbers. Pre-con condos sales in this region have collapsed, and projects that do not sell do not get built. The completions arriving right now are from projects launched like years ago, and that pipeline is running dry, which means the number of new condos hitting this market in 2028 and 2029 was already decided by what did not get sold in 2024 and 2025. So today's buyer is shopping in a market with too many units. The buyer 3 years from now may be shopping in one with too few. And that's not a forecast I would bet a client's money on, but it is the direction the pipeline points. If you own a Toronto condo or you're trying to buy one, subscribe. I go over through TRREB's condo number specifically every month. Not the blended averages, the hides everything, but what's actually happening in the condo market in the city. And if you subscribe, you can help me keep on making videos just like this. The average Toronto condo sold for about $636,000 in July. That's down about 2% from last July. But you put that beside where we were. In June, the annual decline was 9%. In July, it's 2%. The rate at which condo values are falling year over year shrank by about 7 points in a single month. And month to month, the average condo sold for about $5,000 more in July than it did in June. And a month, that is normally one of the slowest of the year. So before anyone starts celebrating, let me put the appropriate handcuffs on this. 1 month of monthly movement in a segment this size is noise. It's not proof yet. Condo prices have bounced around in a band all year. So up about 15K in April, up 4,000 in May, down 9,000 in June, up 6,000 in July. So if I built a video around the April increase, I would have looked pretty foolish in June. The reason July matters is not the price bounce, is that the price bounce is sitting on top of supply data that has been improving for months in a straight line. So new listings, they're down 18%. Active listings, down 16%. Months of supply, down more than a full month. Ratio up 6.5 points. So when the underlying supply picture improves for months and then the price stops falling, that ordering is what the beginning of a floor actually looks like. And that's the pattern. Price is the last thing to turn. It always is. And that's not the same as telling you condos are about to take off. They're not even close. What I'm telling you is that the ideas of condos dropping 10% a year forever just took a serious hit in this report. District by district, the picture splits. Inside Toronto, 1,000 condos sold at an average about 672,000. Toronto Central, that's talking about downtown core, did about 700 units at 716,000. Toronto West, 616,000, 199 sales. Toronto East, 512,000, 129 sales. Outside the city, so I'm talking about 905, 510 condos sold at about 560,000. So two things stand out. First, the city holds about 2/3 of all condo sales and the majority of the inventory as well. There's about 5,000 active listings inside Toronto against 8,000 region-wide. So if you're a buyer, the choice is in the city. Second, the East End it's the value play. An average condo in Toronto East costs about $200,000 less than in Toronto Central. And the East End is also selling closest to asking at about 98% and also fastest at 34 days. One trap to avoid in Central is that this is where a lot of condos are mispriced. The Central average, 716,000, but the median, the middle number, 586,000. So that's a gap of about 130,000 between those two numbers. So when the average sits that far above the median, that means a large handful of expensive sales are pulling the average up. While half of everything that traded went for under 586,000. So you own let's say a basic 1-bedroom downtown condo and price off that $716,000 headline, you're going to sit there for months and wonder why no one's calling. So obviously don't use that average. Look at the comparables in your building. So you price off of the median and the comparable sales in your building. So never look at averages. Averages are just giving you trends. So let's zoom out to a decade and July lands in its proper place. The average GTA condo sold for $416,000 in 2016. By 2019, it was about $587,000. The pandemic ran it to $629,000 in 2020 and $681,000 in 2021. And the peak in 2022, $758,000. Then the correction, $717,000 in 2023, $702,000 in 2024, $667,000 in 2025. In July of this year, $636,000. So that's about $120,000 below the peak at 2022. So that's a decline of about 16% over 4 years. But notice where the line actually sits. Today's average is still above almost $7,000 above 2020 annual average. So roughly $48,000 above 2019. So 4 years of correction has taken place, and condo prices are back to where they were in 2020, not where they were before the pandemic and not in 2016. So if you own your condo since before 2020, you're still ahead. If you bought at the peak in 2021, 2022, you're underwater. And this report does not change that. Though it does suggest the hole stop getting deeper. So what do you actually do with this? If you own a condo, you've been waiting for the bottom before selling, understand that what this report does and does not say. It does not say the bottom is in. It says the supply pressure that caused the decline has been easing for a month and the price finally responded, because remember, that's the last to respond. If you've been holding on, period, to avoid selling into a falling market, the falling part just got a little less obvious. That's a real change in your situation. If you're a condo buyer, you've had the strongest hand in this market for 2 years, and you still have a good hand at about 5 months of supply and 97% of asking. But your position is weaker than it was a year ago, last July, and that's on every single supply number. The stack of desperate listings you're counting on picking through is about 1,600 units, smaller than a year ago. So if you plan was to wait until next spring for a better deal, the data is no longer obvious on your side. And to be specific about where you shop, because the district numbers hand you a strategy. Toronto East is selling 98% of asking in 34 days, which means the discounts are thinner there and you should not expect to lowball your way in. Toronto Central is at 96%. 38 days on the market with about 3,400 active listings. That's the deepest pool of inventory and the most room to negotiate in the entire region. So if your goal is the best deal you can negotiate, the core is where that still exists. If your goal is a unit that will hold value and resell easily, the East End is telling you something with those numbers. And if you own a condo and trying to move up to a house, this is the most important report you've seen in a while. So let me be precise about the trade. Your condo is no longer falling the way it was, which is good for the south side of your move. But houses are tightening faster than condos at 43% on the ratio against your 37%. So the gap between what you sell and what you buy is closing from the wrong end for you. Before that, one more thing worth understanding about every number I have given you today, because it applies to your unit more than any of them. Everything in the trade report is a regional figure. The 8,300 active listings, the 5.3 months of supply, the 37% ratio, all this is whole GTA average together. So none of it describes your building. Your building, it's its own small market. 2 towers on same street can be completely different amounts of inventory sitting in them, depending on how many investors bought there and how many units are on the same floor plans as yours and what the maintenance fees look like compared to the building next door. The regional average cannot see any of that. And buyers shopping your building are not comparing you to the GTA. They're comparing you to the other units they can walk through in the same building. So when you're deciding what your unit's worth, the question is ask your agents not what the market did last month. It's how many units are listed in your building right now and how many are the same size and layout as yours and what the recent sales and buildings actually closed at. That's a quick question for anyone to answer, and it'll tell you more about your pricing than every chart in this video. So here's the practical version. Get a real number on your unit this month using the building's actual recent sales in your specific floor plan, if that is possible, and not an online guesstimate. Then what else do? You take that number, subtract your mortgage, your selling costs, and hold against the houses you actually want. That math works. This is a better month to move than any of the last 6 were. If it does not work, now know exactly how far you are, and which is more useful than waiting for a headline to tell you it is safe.